You are listening to the Battle Born Libertarian Podcast, the official podcast of the Libertarian Party of Nevada. Here's your host, Tyus France.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to the Battle Born Libertarian Podcast. I'm your host, Tyus France, and across the airwaves from me, not in the same room, however, in the same town, and definitely in the same mindset, is my co-host, Alex. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me, Tyus.
So we've got a bunch of stuff to talk about because last week there was a lot of stuff that went down. So we've got, the Super Bowl happened and SpaceX launched a big rocket and we had our local convention, right? County convention. And now we've got an upcoming state convention. Do you want to talk a little bit about the state convention that's coming up, what to expect? How people can help out?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can get all the information on our website, www.lpnevada.org. You should see a banner ad for it. You can also click on events and see all of our calendar of events that are upcoming. And basically it'll be Saturday, March 3rd. I believe credentialing period begins at 11. And basically that means that's your time to check in and become registered if you need to. This sort of thing, and then by 12:30 or 1, we'll begin the actual business of the convention, and that's where we'll be putting up candidates for state and federal offices, any county vacancies, putting up national convention delegates. There's a lot to do, and definitely I know it'll be better with all of you who are faithful listeners coming also.
So imagine I'm a 5-year-old, because I'm not much more than that, as not age-wise, just intelligence-wise. And would you explain to me what a convention is and what it's for and why it's important? What's going on there?
Sure.
For those that aren't involved in politics.
For those who are just getting into politics, conventions are basically just a fancy way to say meeting. And what we're really doing in a political sense is we're electing, let's say, and there's various types of conventions you might have. This is an even year, which is an election year. So our conventions this year will be focused more on partisan public office candidates, putting people on the ballot. In some states, you might be working towards ballot access. Of course, we have that here in Nevada. And so there are a lot of things to do. But most important of which are, of course, putting candidates' names on the ballot for the general election in November that everyone will have a chance to vote on. So, relatively few people, maybe 100 libertarians can make the decision on who gets to be on the ballot in front of 2 million Nevadans. So, it's a pretty important position, and it's pretty important that we have people come that are very interested in putting up liberty-minded candidates who understand the ins and outs and are willing to work towards liberty and not compromise away like we saw, and we'll talk about a little bit later with Democrats and Republicans last night. But basically, conventions are also a great opportunity to get involved. We have a number of tables set up so you can get involved. I believe our social media director got involved at our state convention last year, and Troy has been a great addition to the team. And Tyus, if I'm not mistaken, you got involved in our last year county convention.
I think that's right. That sounds about right to me.
Yeah, so really, it's an opportunity. If you've been thinking to yourself, I'm going to go to a social, and you haven't made it. I signed up on their website, but they weren't doing any volunteer events that I are in my area or that I wanted to participate in. I don't like doing envelopes, or I didn't want to knock on doors. When are we going to do a phone bank or whatever it is? This is your opportunity to come and sign up in person as a volunteer. And if you have a passion like podcasts or social media or legislation or running for office, getting in touch with us and making sure that we can get you into the team, that's what we want. That's how we grow. We're looking constantly for new and upcoming leaders in the state party, and of course the county parties are getting off the ground as well. So, there's a number of positions we're looking to fill, and of course we always need as much volunteer help as we can get. There are always things to do if you want to volunteer. And the very best way to get involved, if you haven't come to an in-person social, is just check us out at the state convention. See if it's you. See if you're down with the town or whatever they say now. And yeah, so basically the convention is it's a statewide meeting of libertarians. It's our chance to say, this is what we're really important about. This is what we're all about. And so there's some business we might take up, like making some bylaws changes or electing a state executive committee officer that's a vacancy, and this sort of thing. But you'll also hear some great stuff about how the party is doing, how it's growing, and how you can help us grow further. I give a report. I'm the executive director. You'll also be hearing, of course, from our chairman. You'll be hearing from our candidates, and you'll be hearing from really all of the executive board. And this will be your opportunity to kind of say, hey, I noticed that we did this, and I wasn't really sure why. This is your chance to kind of interact in person and in kind of a formal way. And so you have a lot of power as a libertarian coming to one of these conventions, because ultimately your state party leadership answers to this convention.
Now, you said
to
you mentioned that this is where people get nominated to run for office, or elected to run for office, or whatever that term might be.
Yeah.
How does somebody end up running for office? Let's say one of our listeners wants to run for office. How would they go about doing that?
Well, first and foremost, if you want to run for office, awesome. We need lots of great liberty-minded people running for office. The best way to go about it is, in my opinion anyway, is to go ahead and contact the state party headquarters, and you can do that by emailing any of us listed on the leadership team page on the website, but most particularly you can email me, and you can also email anybody on the executive committee. And the reason that you want to start that dialogue, and if you don't want to deal with that, you can also message us on our Facebook page or Twitter, and our social media director, who's awesome, will get that to us. And the idea is we want to start a dialogue with you early, right? We want to get an idea of where, maybe you're thinking you want to run for a county commissioner, but maybe we're like, hey, an even easier race to win in Clark County area is an assembly race. Have you thought about running for assembly? This sort of thing. Because we want to give you the tools for success. We want to get you prepared so you got to do filings, you got to get a number, so there's a number of things that we'll do, and we can help talk you through running and what it'll entail. And then if you decide to run, you'll need to attend the state convention. County conventions are passed, so if you want to run for office in the state of Nevada as a libertarian, you'll need to come to our state convention. And what you'll need to do at minimum is you'll need to do two things. First, at the convention, you have to be nominated and elected to be our nominee for the party. Basically, it's like our version of a primary. If we were bigger, if we had 5% voter registration, we would start doing statewide primaries. But because we're at 1%, basically, we're still minor party status, which means we do our own primaries at our conventions. So you'll need to secure at least 50% plus one vote in order to be on the ballot. Then what you have to do is you have to go down, once you've gotten that certification from us, then you can go down and file for office at your county. I believe it's the county clerk's office. It could be different in different counties. And I know at least in Clark and Washoe, it should be the county clerk. And you're going to basically file as a candidate for a particular party, the Libertarian Party, and you'll pay a nominal fee. I believe it's like $100 or $60, or if it's federal, it's going to be more. It's going to be $300, something like that, governor, etc. But there's only going to be 4 names on the ballot maximum for governor, and one of those might be ours. So, it's just one of those things, Tyus, where basically what you get from the party it initially is you get on the ballot without having to go through an expensive signature process, petitions, all of the things that you would have to do if you ran as an independent. And you don't have to go through the primary process of the Republicans and Democrats, where you have to get elected in June before you can go to the general election ballot. In a lot of ways, getting on the ballot as a libertarian is one of the easiest ways to do it, simply because we have ballot access, but we don't have to go through a expensive and difficult primary process that really shouldn't be publicly funded anyway. But that's neither here nor there, I guess.
No, that's great. Now, you also mentioned that we're considered like a minor party, which I get, despite the fact that we're growing at a really, really awesome clip. But you mentioned that whole 1% voter registration, and we've been keeping our eye on that a little bit, and I know that number is getting very, very close. So where are we at currently with that?
So at the end of January, we made great progress, even though there were 40,000 new registered voters in the state of Nevada. Not only did we gain, but we made progress on the previous month. So now we've closed the gap to only be 65 voters away from hitting the 1% threshold. That means 1 out of 100 registered voters is a libertarian. If you go to a voting booth in November and you see 300 people there, there's another 2 or 3 people there that are libertarians. And that's pretty exciting. Because
if not more, right? Like maybe those maybe those Republicans are libertarians and they don't know it yet. They have the same values, right, but they just registered under a bigger party, right?
Sure, and so there might be any number of other people there that, and we always do get more vote share than we have registered voters. But the point is I think it's cool that it's like a number, right? 1 out of 100. That's like a real, that's a person, right? For the last 35 years in Nevada, we've been fractions, right? Now we're an entire person. I believe it was Steve Jobs that said, "Beware the 1%." Right? And look where Apple's at now. I'm not saying that we're
down,
Apple,
99 to go.
Right. Right. We've convinced 1% of the registered voters that we've got the right platform. And yes, we have things to do to grow. We are not. I'm not saying that we're tomorrow a major party, but what it is it's an achievable goal, right? We put our heads down. We keep doing professional campaigns that highlight our great platform that everyone already agrees with. Then we continue to build our fundraising so we can help candidates and help get our message out there even further. And we make sure that we have a state headquarters for people to come in and volunteer. And we continue to register new voters so that we have a block so that we can negotiate with Democrats and Republicans. And I know compromise sounds shitty, but at least when people compromise with libertarians, we're going towards the liberty side, which is not what happened last night. I don't know if you wanted to talk about that at all.
Sure, let's dive in. Well, okay, before we dive into that, because that's super important, if you're one of these listeners and you're like, hey, I've been on the fence about registering to vote, now's clearly the time. When we're talking about, nearly 50 people can swing this one way or the other, this is when we need you. This is when oftentimes you think, hey, my vote doesn't matter, right? There's so many people that are voting. My vote doesn't matter. Well, right now your vote matters a lot. Like those who are registered to vote right now, it's the single individuals that really, really matter. So if you've been sitting on your hands going, it won't matter one way or the other if I do anything about it, now's the time. Please register to vote. It matters a lot to us.
In fact, I'm going to try and figure out who it is that's the 1% registered voter, if I can. I don't know if I'm able to with the state lists, the way that they do them, but I might be able to figure out who was the 1% for us and give you a shout out and thank you privately, of course, and if with your permission publicly. But yeah, I think that's so cool that you could be right. It's like when you have the 100,000th customer. That's sort of how it feels for us. Is that we're 65 away from that big 1% threshold, and that is such a big threshold, and I wish that it wasn't, but we don't live in a multi-party system. We're having to smash our way to the top, right? Break through what I'd consider titanium ceilings, nothing glass about them, and so, but we're doing it. We got all of us got our blowtorches out. I don't know how far I can take this analogy, but but yeah, that you make a good point though, Tyus. 65 people. You could be one of our listeners. Could be one of the 65 that determines whether or not we hit 1%. And I just think that's pretty freaking cool.
And if you've already registered to vote, then you are already one of that 1%. You've already made that impact, and what you can do to help us out is to get other people on board with you. You could be the person that tips that scale over, and we need your help. We need your help to tip the scale. So please don't be afraid to be the person. It's your opportunity to be the hero for us. So we need you, and now's the time to act. So go out and do that. Hey, tell us what happened. Tell us what happened yesterday. You've alluded to it a couple of times.
Oh, yes. Yeah, so some foreshadowing there. So, what we're dealing with is typically, what you see with these budget bills is that the Democrats and Republicans both agree to shoot 1 foot each for the country. And that's exactly what occurred last night. For those of you who've been following it on the news, basically, depending upon what news channels you get, you're going to see a different victory story. But us libertarians, we know that American voters are the ones that lost last night. And there were a number of people like Thomas Massey and Senator Rand Paul that were pointing out that it's our children that lost. And the reason they lost last night is because we just blew past spending caps in a huge way. And not only for defense, which you might assume since the Republicans are in party, they're very much pro-defense spending. They not only blew past the discretionary spending caps for defense, but they needed Democrats to help. They didn't. Republicans and Democrats themselves both had things they didn't like about this bill. So they went to the Democrats and said, hey, what will get you to say yes? And the deal with the devil was increasing non-defense government spending caps. So we basically have spent more. We have a bigger deficit. So first of all, what we did in December is we lowered taxes, which sounds great. I'm all for lowering taxes. But if you don't lower spending caps, what we're really doing is we're charging the credit card, the country's credit card, to our children. And I don't think that's fair. That's not right. And I think that as millennials and Gen Xers kind of get into the offices and get involved in politics, we understand how bad the country was kind of screwed up, right? Where we just have destroyed our debt. We have such a huge debt, you can't even fathom it. I mean, what's $20 trillion? I mean, you don't even see that much money here in Vegas. It's just
$20 trillion. Just try and get your head around that if you're listening. Not millions, not billions, trillions. And if you go online and look up what $1 trillion looks like, if you were just to print up that much money, it's staggering.
Now the feds have raised rates, and we think that this is the appropriate time to be spending $1 trillion. That just doesn't make any sense. And this isn't sound fiscal policy, right? This isn't a recession. Job growth is still up. And so there's no good reason to be deficit spending like this. This is, if at all, this is the time. I mean, even the Federal Reserve finally raised their rates. And the reason that's important is because, the more they raise the rates, then the less free money the central banks, the big banks get from the central bank. So that's why I'm happy with it, because it's not fair that they should be allowed 0.25% interest when the rest of us have to pay 17. And so, in my mind, this was a long time coming, and they didn't deserve the rates anyway. And so now what we're dealing with is just a monstrous $1 trillion deficit, and it's because Democrats and Republicans don't really care about your money. They don't care about the fact that your children are going to have 50, 80, $100 trillion of debt to pay back, or that someday we may not be able to get a loan, and we're going to really need it, right? This is like that person that maxes out their credit card, and then they break their leg. But what are you going to do then? You got nothing. And that's where we're at. I just wonder what it'll be.
The reason, for those of you who don't follow the Fed and interest rates and all of that good stuff, we've let the Federal Reserve Bank, which is not federal, it has no reserves, and it's not a bank, control the interest rates of our country. And normally those interest rates are controlled by a free market. And you want interest rates to go very, very low when you want people to spend money. And we've wanted people to spend money for such a long time that this organization has kept interest rates artificially low. And there's a reason that that's a really bad thing. And the big reason for it is when interest rates are low, people do spend more, but they borrow a lot. They borrow tons and tons of money because interest rates are low. When interest rates are high, it becomes an incentive for people to save money. And what we end up with is the situation our economy is in right now, where almost nobody has enough savings to get by for the next 6 months because they spent all their money. So it's good that interest rates are going up. One of the big problems with all this, what the government's doing, is the government has no way of actually making money in the same way that a business does. A business trades value for your money voluntarily, right? You pay somebody for the products that you value. The government, on the other hand, they only have a few ways to raise capital. One of those ways is taxes, which I'm sure you're familiar with. It's an involuntary way of essentially taking your money, and they may claim that they're trading it for value, and in some cases they may be, and in other cases they might be using your money in ways you don't appreciate. Another way they can do it is they can borrow it. And essentially, when they're raising these debt ceilings, they're saying it's okay for us to borrow more money. And there's no way for us to get back to a point of equilibrium or even independence. If you want to call us the land of the free, you can't be free when you are trapped to your debt. And unfortunately, these debts are not going to be paid by the politicians. Those politicians are going to be dead by the time these debts become due, or when we have to essentially go insolvent on them. A $20 trillion debt is no joke. And in fact, it might be, I hate to say it, it might be impossible to pay back. It's getting to the point. It
might be. Yeah.
It's getting to the point where we might not be able to do it. What were you going to say about the Pentagon?
The Pentagon itself. No, I was just going to say that the Pentagon even said that the biggest threat to national security, for those who are worried about national security all the time, the biggest threat is not terrorists, it's not germs, it's the national debt. They're saying, the military strategists are saying, if we don't tighten our belts now, then when we actually need the money, when we actually have a threat, when, in World War II, pretty much everyone understood that, war bonds meant fighting the Nazis, right? That's what that meant. That meant more tanks, more ammunition. But it's in peacetime, which supposedly we're trying to get it back to, right? But maybe we're not. But in peacetime, we're supposed to be tightening our belts, lowering our debts, right? Just like when life's good, you pay down your debt. That way, when life's bad, and if you do need to borrow, well, first of all, you should have savings. But if you do need to borrow, you have some credit, right? And if we got into a war with a major power right now, I'm not sure that we could continue borrowing. I'm not sure that anybody in the world would want to continue to loan us money when we might run out. And if we run out, then we might lose. I mean, you need gas to make the tanks go. I mean, you need to pay military members you have to fly troops around. Jet fuel is expensive. Planes are expensive. Tanks and battleships are expensive. You can't plan for the future of our national security by spending us into oblivion, and especially when the Pentagon itself is admitting to Congress multiple times saying, hey, first of all, you're spending money on the wrong things that we need. We need different things. We need training, new equipment, this sort of thing. But what you want to do is you want us to hold on to 2 million active duty U.S. Army folks. I mean, it's just ridiculous. When we're fighting no war. I mean, and our founding fathers were against having any kind of standing army. Now, today you might argue that that's a necessary evil. It's part of being in the new global, whatever, where people can nuke you from the safety of their own home. We got to have an army ready to go. Okay, sure. As a minarchist, I might buy into that, but that doesn't mean that we need to have one so large that we could take on the entire world and win. That's not a strategy we've ever employed. Our best strategy has always been diplomacy. The fact is we're allied with most of the modern world. There's no reason that we should be paying for such a large military. And then, of course, on the non-defense funding side, we already know that that's even worse. I mean, we've done in previous episodes, Tyus, about how they've robbed our Social Security. There's going to be a defunding of Medicaid and Medicare at some point because there's not enough money for what's been promised. So that either means that we're going to have seniors pay into... We're going to have people right now paying into Medicare and Medicaid their whole life, and when it comes time to get their Medicare benefits, then Congress is going to go, oh, actually, we don't have any money, so you don't get any. And they have already been told that they're allowed to do this, by the way. there's already been a Supreme Court case by a guy who said, I want my money back, basically, that I paid into Social Security and into Medicare. And the Supreme Court said, actually, that was just a tax. So it's really not your money. It's just another tax. And the only guarantee you have is that what the politicians have told you. And I don't know about you, but with me, what the politicians have to say means next to nothing these days.
Yep. They're taking money in every direction. And you might say, well, why don't they just print up more money? Obviously, we just print money, right? And the answer to that is every time more dollar bills are printed up, it's just making each slice of the pie thinner. So if you're curious why gas prices go up so fast and so explosively, or why does a candy bar nowadays that used to cost 2 pennies, why does that candy bar cost $2? The reason is we keep printing up more money, so the money becomes worth less and less every time. So it's a secret tax that's taking place. There's no way out of this besides reducing our spending and increasing what we produce. It's not about consumption, it's about production. And that's what we need to be focusing on. But every time that we let our government expand these debt ceilings, what we're really giving them is we're saying, here's more power. That you have more power over us in not only current day, because now you've got more money that you can spend, but in the future, for our children, you've got power over them because they are going to be the ones that are on the hook for this cash that we don't have. And it's not even like we don't have it. We don't even have close to what it costs. And if you're curious where it's being spent, it's all over the place. You know, we just spent Elon Musk, for example. I mentioned that he launched that new SpaceX rocket. Now, SpaceX doesn't reveal exactly how much money they're getting from taxes, but we know that it's about $5.5 billion in government contracts. That's your money, and we just launched a car into space. Now, I'm not saying it's a bad idea to launch a car into space. Maybe that's exactly the thing we should be doing, but if that's the thing we should be doing, if that's a profitable venture, then maybe that company should want to do it themselves rather than taking your money or the money of people that can't afford it. The people that, you know what, they're trying to get by, yes, they need to go get a job, and you know what we're doing? We're launching electric vehicles into orbit of Mars. That's what your money's being spent on. And I know NASA's great and innovative. That's super, super cool. Here in Vegas, we spent $2 billion on a stadium. I got to see the Super Bowl. I'm super excited about the Super Bowl. And yeah, maybe we'll have a Super Bowl here in 2023. But I'm going to tell you this. The money that comes in from that Super Bowl for 2023 is not going to go to the low-income families that helped pay for that stadium. That's not how it's going to work out. You're not going to get your money back for it. The people that are going to get the money back for that are the people that own these organizations. The big guys, the rich, are who you're subsidizing. So take back control of these situations. It's the only way you're going to take back the government, because the government is of the people, by the people, which means it's you. It means you are the people that need to be in control of it. And the only one that's going to stop you from being robbed and your neighbor from being robbed is going to be you getting out there and doing something. And if you want to know how you can get involved, please go to lpnevada.org and see what you can do. Come to our convention, see how you can volunteer. If you've got some money, please send it our way, because we will take action to try and prevent this type of abuse, this type of tyranny, this type of misconduct that is taking place all around us. You know what? I'm going to wrap it up on that rant because I can't. I'm not going to get any more. I'm not going to get any more aggressive than that. You know, we appreciate you tuning in, and please get involved. Until next time, this is Tyus sitting right with Alex and somewhere in Vegas, and hoping that you make it all about freedom.
This show is brought to you by the Libertarian Party of Nevada. Music is provided by T. Sims. Please support the show by subscribing, sharing it with friends, and leaving a positive review on iTunes. For more information or to learn how to get involved, visit lpnevada.org. Thank you for listening.